Hi, my name is Paula Gruben. I am an author and an adoptee, and I live in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was adopted from birth in 1974 under the closed adoption system, which was the norm back in those days. My birth parents were going through a divorce at the time, and that was finalized shortly before I was born. I always knew that I was adopted. It was a concept that my folks introduced me to from a very young age, so it never actually came as a shock or a surprise to me. My dad is a pediatrician, and my mum works for him in a secretarial capacity. They met at university when my dad was studying medicine and my mum was studying architecture. It was a closed adoption, so I had very little information about my birth parents while I was growing up. The only thing that my folks did tell me about them was that one of my birth parents was involved in a medical field and the other one in a creative field, similar to my mom and dad. I never really knew if this was all the information that my folks had about my biological parents, or if this was all that they were willing to divulge to me at the time. I suffered from very poor self-esteem as a kid growing up, and unfortunately I never got any psychological therapy, counseling, any help for that. Things were different in those days. I don't think a lot of parents sent their kids for therapy. These days it's, the taboo and the stigma, it's not so much there anymore. So kids are getting the help that they need when they need it. My personal challenges were primarily emotional and psychological ones. A lot of it was related to the fact that I was adopted. I always felt that there was this huge gaping hole in my soul that I felt could only be filled by meeting my biological family. Kids can be cruel, so I kept my adoptee status very secret, very private while I was growing up, because I was terrified of being found out and being teased and bullied for being adopted. There's always been this stigma attached to adoptees that they are unwanted kids, that there's something wrong with them, and you end up feeling different, like you don't fit in. I know it's not like this for all adoptees, but for me it was an issue. So those were some of the challenges that I faced growing up. I had a very happy childhood, and I never really thought terribly much about meeting my birth mom. But when my best friend's mother committed suicide when we were 14, it was a huge wake-up call to me about how short and how unpredictable life is. And it became a burning obsession of mine to meet my birth mom before either she or I died, and ask her all the questions that I had for her surrounding my adoption, why she had given me away, and find out more about my roots, my bloodline, my DNA. From the age of 14 was when I decided I wanted to meet her, and it would be another 7 years until I actually accessed my file on my own without my parents' consent. And I traced her and met her when I was 21. I was given very basic information, and they wanted to mediate and arrange a reunion at their offices, and I decided that was not the way I wanted to do things. So with the help of my boyfriend's mom, who's now my mom-in-law, it was literally a couple of phone calls. We picked up the phone book and made a couple of phone calls, and I first spoke to my birth father, and he gave me the contact details for my birth mom, and we literally met the next day. I am a mom, I am a wife. I'm still in contact with my birth family. I have 2 half brothers and 1 half sister, and the adopted brother that I grew up with. So it's a big family now. I am a writer. This year I released my first book called Umbilicus. It's an autobiographical novel about my journey as an adoptee. I guess I'm in a good, happy place in my life. I feel like I finally achieved what I wanted to do with my life. There's a lot of people who say that they want to write a book, but very few who actually do it, so I'm quite proud of myself. Explaining these kind of things to a 6-year-old, it's kind of complicated and awkward. He's got 3 grannies and 3 grandpas. I don't really think he knows the difference between the mom that raised me and the mom that made me. I try and explain it in an age-appropriate way. But in time, as he gets older, I will explain more. And obviously through reading my book, he'll get the full picture. And it was one of the reasons I actually wrote this story, was for him, for his future family one day. I never planned on being a mom. It was not on my radar, not something I ever pictured myself being was somebody's mom. My child was an accident, and the best accidents that ever happened to me. He honestly is the best thing that ever happened to me. So I had never considered having children, so no, adoption never entered the picture. I'm very happy with my one. My birth mom was sent over to London when she was pregnant with me by her mom, my maternal grandmother, for an abortion in 1974 when it was still illegal in South Africa. Ultimately, she decided against it, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. So I'm incredibly grateful for that decision, and I will certainly never judge anyone for choosing to terminate a pregnancy, but I would like women and girls to understand that there are options available to them, adoption being one of them. And I really did have a very good upbringing. I'm very grateful to all the people in my life. I thank my mom and dad for being the parents that I needed. I thank my mom and dad for the life that they gave me, one that I might not have had I stayed with my birth parents. I consider myself very lucky to be here today.
I blinked.